If you've ever wondered what it's like riding behind the peloton in the world's biggest cycling race, this episode is for you. I'll talk with a reporter who does the motor reports for NBC on the Tour de France. We'll also talk about what qualities some of the best American alpine skiers share and how he uses his experience to enhance NBC's ski coverage during the Olympics. Next on Sports in the Making. Thank you for joining me on Sports in the Making, a podcast where we find out what people in the sports and sports broadcasting industry do, how they've made an impact in the sports world, and how it all comes together. I'm your host, Don Cardona, and this is episode number 22. Well, the Alpine Ski season ended abruptly because of COVID-19 earlier this year, and the world's most prestigious cycling race, the Tour de France, has been delayed until later in 2020. But fortunately, I had the pleasure of talking with one of my friends and colleagues who works on both of those sporting events. His name is Steve Porino, and he's done quite a bit in his professional career, first as a downhill skier on the U.S. ski team, which then turned into stints as a broadcaster, first covering alpine skiing, and eventually covering multiple Olympic Games with NBC, and that later turned into riding on the streets and the countryside of Le Tour de France. We'll talk about all of that, plus what he does to find interesting things to report on during his broadcasts to help make the viewer's experience enjoyable, entertaining, and memorable. This is my conversation with a great guy who has a lot of humor, and he gets to be in places that many sports fans would like to be in. This is Steve Porino, announcer and reporter for NBC Sports. Okay, I'm with Steve Porino, former U.S. ski team downhill racer. He's a broadcaster as well, covering 6 Olympics with NBC, and he serves as their ski reporter and analyst covering the Winter Olympics since Salt Lake in 2002. And he's a commentator for NBC Sports Group's cycling coverage, including Le Tour, the Tour de France, and other cycling. Thank you for joining me, Steve. I appreciate it.
Don, you got it. It's nice to be reconnected after this many years. Yeah. How long has it been since we were working together?
It's only been a couple of years, but it feels like it's almost a decade now.
I know.
All right, so first questions first. What have you been doing since the end of Alpine was canceled because of COVID, and how have you been handling COVID?
Yard work, Don. My yard. I wish I could just take you outside and there was visuals here, because my yard is, I was going to say on fire, but that's not quite the right impression. But it was one of those things. I live in Sun Valley, Idaho, which is, it is absolutely stunning. So as far as places to be quarantined, for a guy that loves the mountains and loves the streams and whatnot, this is about as nice a place as I could expect to be stuck. And as you know, working in television, we don't spend enough time with our families. And so my family at this point might actually be sick of me. And that point I may have cleared that hurdle a month ago. But it's been awesome. To be apart from the fear of when am I going to work again? And I think that's true for everyone out there, right?
Yeah.
You want to make use of all this time that we all talk about we never get. And yet there's that anxiety in the background, like, oh, geez, I can't really focus on the family because, when's the next paycheck coming? There's a bit of that going on.
Sure.
But I have really been able to embrace being home because I got, a daughter graduating from high school, a daughter getting into high school. I never see him enough. And then I got a 4-year-old who I try to keep him from destroying the house 24/7. So that's full time. And my wife's been working the whole time. So we got total role reversals going on. And so COVID-19 has introduced me to a whole new way of life. And for right now, I'm digging it.
Well, let's talk about your life up to this point. So you've skied your entire life, from my understanding. You were on the U.S. ski team. How was it for you to get from, just being a young skier to the U.S. ski team?
It's interesting. It's long enough ago that it just was organic. You have these dreams as a kid of making the Olympics or making the U.S. ski team. And as a kid, you, of course, have no idea what that path looks like, and you don't care.
Right.
You just want to do your thing. And I had a very unusual lead up to the point where I was an elite skier in the U.S., which is to say I lived from the age of 6 to 14 outside of Chicago. I skied at a ski area that had 256 vertical feet. One of my early coaches when I was 6 years old was Lindsey Vonn's dad, Alan Kildow.
Interesting.
Yeah. And, but it wasn't the obvious, kid outside Chicago. My dad is European. I had older sisters. My dad grew up ski racing, so it was kind of something our family did, and I tagged along. By the time I was 14 years old, I was one of the best in the Midwest, and my dad got transferred to a job in New York City. And so I had this choice to make, and I decided that I would go to a ski academy, which is not something I'd ever considered or even knew that they existed. Ended up going to Burke Mountain Academy, where I graduated, in 1984. But at the time, that was the absolute mecca of, there was only 3 ski academies in the country. So much concentration of talent went there. But I blindly ended up there. This wasn't like I knew I wanted to make the U.S. ski team, and that was the obvious step, and which I think is more the case. People are more wide open, or eyes wide open today. I wasn't then. And so it was, natural. And then I kept getting better and evolving. And eventually I found a talent, even though I was a tiny kid, for downhill. And at age 18, I made the World Junior Championships. And from that point on, that was when there was clarity. Like, I want to make the U.S. ski team. I want to be a downhiller. This is what I want to do. And then 2 years later, I had to take some time after high school to continue my racing to make the national team, which I did. And that was in 1988. So actually 4 years after I graduated from high school was I named to the national team.
Yeah. What is it like in the talent level difference between being an amateur and being on this U.S. ski team, and then competing throughout the world against all the other great skiers?
Intensity, right? At this, the way I described it, right? I mean, obviously I was lucky that I went to a school where there was such a concentration of talent, but that's relative. That was, U.S. talent, right? When we know that this is a European sport, the concentration of talent over there is so much greater that, Darren Rawls, who is, him, but I mean, your listeners may not, but arguably the greatest speed skier ever to come out of the U.S., and he won the world championship, Super G in 2001, just an absolute star. But he had the quote, right, "Hundredths matter. 1/100th of a second makes a difference in the world of alpine skiing." And you don't begin to really understand that until you are placed in an environment where you make an error, it costs you 1/10 of a second, and rather than drop from at the amateur level, if you want to call it that, from 1st to 4th, you go from 1st to 20th.
Yeah.
And so you reinterpret what that 10th means, because it's, going from 1st to 20th is failure. Going from 1st, to 4th, it's like, oh, damn, bad luck.
Yeah.
And so it's no longer bad luck. It is, these moments become catastrophic, and it causes you to focus in on the tenths. And as Darren so eloquently put it, hundredths, because they matter. They are the difference. And so that, to me, is the difference of operating at an amateur level where, your talent can still land you on the podium, but really you were sloppy in how you did it and how you did everything leading up to that, from your training to your racing to your preparation, et cetera.
Right. All right. I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit here, because you did mention hundredths matter, which I've heard you say on some of the broadcasts we've worked on together, and you are a downhiller. Explain briefly, if you can, for our listeners who may not be as familiar with skiing, what the differences are between slalom, giant slalom, Super G, and downhill, and what's the mentality that each one has to bring to be successful?
To give it a one-liner, I'm going to go quote one of America's great and most recognized names, and that is Bill Johnson. Bill Johnson, 1984 Olympic gold medal, beat all the Europeans at a time when the Americans had no presence at the elite level on the men's side. And he said that slalom and giant slalom are events. Downhill's a cult. And so that, there is, if you live within the walls of alpine skiing, a real mentality difference between a technical skier and a speed skier. And so the technical disciplines are slalom and giant slalom. The speed disciplines are downhill and super G. And to kind of go in order of highest speed to lowest speed, downhill, its origins really are who can get from the top of the mountain to the bottom fastest. And over time, right, that's evolved into control gates. And you're obviously, the equipment, everything has improved so much. If you just let people go from top to bottom, they'd all be dead. We'd all be dead. I wouldn't be having this conversation. So,
Right.
But it is the highest speed, speeds obviously, exceeding 80 miles an hour, and in some very rare cases, over 100 miles an hour. That's downhill. And it's really kind of mastering terrain in the mountain. It's a little bit more associated with what we would call free skiing or extreme skiing. Super G is the most modern iteration of the ski events. And that came out in the early 80s. And it was really to balance out. If you're a speed skier, you only had one discipline, downhill. So they added Super G, which is really just eliminated the straight sections and super high speeds of downhill. But it kept all the elements of speed and danger. And what it did take out was in downhill, you get to run the course ahead of time in the days leading up to it. So you had training runs. Super G was 90 minutes of inspection, go. So it actually makes it as dangerous or more dangerous than downhill. Those are the speed events. Slalom, that's slalom and downhill are the original events of alpine skiing dating back to the 1930s. And then giant slalom came in later. So giant slalom, and people may, if they followed any level of Olympic skiing, that's the home of one Ted Ligety. And we often refer to giant slalom as the art of skiing because you can't just be athletic. You can't just be brave. You have to have everything dialed in. And if you're having a bad week in giant slalom and you're the best skier in the world, you cannot just overcome by mentally putting yourself in this competitive state. Everything just needs to be so finely tuned. So that's, giant slalom is the cornerstone of all skiing. And it's, average speeds in giant slalom are kind of 35 to 45 miles an hour. It's still quite high speed. Sure. And then there's slalom, which is, those are the quickest turns. And that is, we typically associate slalom, like in track and field, it would be the sprinting. It's youth and bravado, right? Mm-hmm. There's no old, there are a handful of sprinters that are old, but generally speaking, it's kind of the home of the young and quick. But quickness, explosivity, that is the cornerstone of slalom skiing. And, that's kind of 25 to 35 miles an hour, and you ski right over the top of the gates. And these days, right, everyone's got armor on them so they can smash the plastic. But that is sort of from fastest to slowest. But yeah. Slalom and giant slalom, very technical, much more so than the speed events, which I shouldn't say aren't technical, but there is a screw needs to be a little bit loose, and there has to be an appetite for fear and speed in those disciplines in a way that you don't really have it in slalom and giant slalom.
Right.
And that's what Bill Johnson would call the cult of speed.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned Bill Johnson. You've seen and covered some of the best skiers in history from the American side, Bode Miller. You mentioned Ted Ligety, Lindsey Vonn, and now Mikaela Shiffrin. So having been a skier, what makes them stand out from other skiers that you've seen or covered?
Well, different. You've got a whole bunch of very different characters in there that have all made it to greatness. And I think maybe that's one thing that is a staple of American stars, is that they're all very different, where I would make the argument that a lot of the dominance that we saw over the history of alpine skiing in Switzerland and Austria, those are the power nations. You can see similarities in their stars, right? They had a model to follow. There was, again, they had that density of competition. So they all kind of, in some ways, mirrored each other much more so than Americans do when we are spread out across this very large country. You don't get to see other people ski growing up. That may be great. And so you tend to be, and Bode Miller is the quintessential American in that he kind of invented everything as he went, which is what made him so great.
Interesting.
I mean, Bode Miller, maybe more than anything, was an innovator. And I mean, everyone who reaches the heights of their sport is an innovator of sort, but Bode was unique among those innovators. When skiing is very technologically dependent, if your skis aren't right, you can't win. You just can't. Right. And so there's the evolution of ski equipment over time has changed to whereby, a 13-year-old kid could go back to the 1980 Olympics and win. No question with today's equipment. Wow. No question. Maybe a 10-year-old. That's I'm guessing here, but you get my point.
Sure.
And Bode was at the front end of what we now call shaped skis that aren't these just straight slats that you had to reef on to make turn. And he was handed these skis that were more for recreational skiers to make it easier for recreational skiers to use. And he's like, these are so easy. Why would I use these race skis? And of course, that was anathema to all of certainly Europe, right? You don't ski on tourist skis. It was just beneath everyone. And he's like, yeah, you do you, I'll do me. And then he just took these skis and at a junior level destroyed everybody. And then he went to the World Cup level, and he was kind of at the front end of just taking on all these, the new shaped ski. Just looking at things very differently. He was just constantly doing things differently. It cost him a lot of victories. He only won 33 races. Had he done things maybe a little bit more by the book, that number would be much higher. But some of the victories that he did have are so memorable because he killed people by so much.
Yeah.
That's the innovator he was. And he never departed from that. So anyway, and another way he evolved is he became a little bit more withdrawn, much more of a maverick. I can remember 2002 Olympic Games, I'd be up in the start, easy to chat with at the Olympics, chat. And that's where he won 2 silver medals. He was on Leno, he was a huge star. And then you go to 2006, right? He is more than any other Winter Olympic athlete in 2006. He's expected to be America's star, if not the Olympics star. And of course, he didn't win anything. And he was maligned for being out late and partying. And now I had to chase the guy down to talk to him. And of course, you can understand why he wouldn't want to talk to me. I'm not sure I really wanted to talk to him either, but that was, there's footage of me chasing him down the street, which is my least, as you know, Don, this is not what I like to do, but that was the mandate.
That's your
job. He had escaped the finish line after, failing to win any medals. And this was it. And they had it wasn't a drone, but it was this plane that flew over the valley in Italy to where when they pulled back, I mean, you could see France, hundreds of miles in either direction. And it also had the ability to zoom in, and they found Bode with the camera. And so I'm getting directions on where he is as I'm chasing him around. It was like an FBI hit kind of thing. And so, that was Bode Miller in just 4 years of becoming so famous that everyone in the world wanted to talk to him. And he became overwhelmed, right? And that was when. So anyway, that's Bode. That's a long story, but that's there's a lot more to Bode. But those are 2 kind of bookends for me that really sort of describe this evolution of the character.
Yeah, and then as as far as Lindsey Vonn, her career's wrapped up, but she was kind of a pioneer in her own right as well.
Absolutely, and what she did, Bode was supremely gifted. His coordination, his ability to look at something and 2 minutes later be able to do it. And then also, he was never one to copy other people. He would borrow and then say, well, that's stupid. Why don't you do it like this? And he could evolve, technically and do these things in very short order. So his ability, his athletic IQ is Einstein-like, right? Yeah. That's where I put him. Vonn is all about grit. And she is the one that took certainly women's alpine racing and said, this is what hard work looks like. And it would go 8 hours a day. She'd be working out. So Lindsey Vonn was not she wasn't untalented, but that's not why she went on to be the winningest skier of all time. It was her ability to A, work harder than everyone at that time, and B, her ability to swallow fear and race at her limit every time she got in the gate is like nobody I've ever seen, male or female, because she crashed more than anyone. And when you crash in downhill, and it certainly happened to me, you're gun shy for a long time, if not forever. And she destroyed her body. And, apart from her ability to work hard to get the bones and ligaments back intact, she got her mind back in that fearless space that you need to be in faster than anybody in the history of sport. And that is why she is so special to me. Just absolutely fearless. And we saw that, you talk about 2006. I was standing right there during the training run where maybe people don't remember this, but she took this horrific crash and got hauled off in a helicopter. And that's when Peekaboo Street went to visit her in the hospital and said, you can do this. But she destroyed herself and then came back, not to win, but I want to say she was 8th place or something. Everyone else would have been going home. Yeah. And she, she's tough. And so, and then 4 years later, right, goes on to win that gold medal that she would say escaped her in 2006.
Right. Well, and just thinking of her in Europe and the way we covered it, the Europeans, I mean, she was a star attraction in Europe as well. And there's plenty of skiers over there. I mean, she's got a practical region named for her in Canada with Lake Lindsey, which is what, Lake Louise?
Yeah. Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, I forget what the number is, 16 or 18 victories at one venue. It's unprecedented in the sport.
Yeah.
But then, as you said, in Europe, Boschi and Bode and certainly Shiffrin, all the Americans are more popular in Europe than they are at home. And that's even true of Vonn, who has obviously elevated way outside the sphere of alpine racing. And, she's a regular in sort of the TMZs and the People magazines, but even with that, Bode Miller had a t-shirt once and it said, "I'm big in Europe," which I always enjoyed. But, that's true of Vonn. They can't walk around in most places in Europe without being recognized. And they can in the US. And that's even true of Shiffrin.
Right. Well, and, you talk about Bode and Ted, Ligety and Lindsey, they kind of came before Mikaela Shiffrin. So do you think Mikaela, with her success and her marketability, can perhaps change that here in the U.S.? I mean, because she seems like she's very well recognized here now as well.
She is. I think like all sports, you need your star, and that's particularly true of fringe sports. And I certainly would put alpine skiing in the fringe sport category in the U.S. I mean, there's no question about it. And our landscape is. I will be a realist about this. Our landscape is cluttered. I mean, we have. You even look at. The NBA without. I just watched The Last Dance, right? And you remember. Because I was a Chicago kid at the time when the Bulls were on fire, and I really like basketball. I don't like playing basketball; it does nothing for me. But I was absolutely glued to the TV when Jordan played. And so even a sport, an important sport in our country, baseball, basketball, football, you see these ebbs and flows based on the stars of the time. And certainly basketball was at this crescendo, and without our stars, we lose traction. And I think Shiffrin can do something for alpine skiing, but to say that, Shiffrin's going to put it right, up next to any of the ball and stick sports that are on network primetime is unrealistic.
That's true.
But will she cause people to pay attention outside of the Olympic cycle? Yeah.
Yeah.
We see that. And you see that now that there's a World Cup race in Killington, Vermont, which is, that's pretty close to an urban center. I want to say there's 90 million people within, there's a stat that Killington itself puts out, but there's 90 million people within 3 hours of Killington. So you can go there for the day, maybe. That place is packed. And Don, I'll tell you this, it is the best attended women's race on the World Cup, and in the top 10%, 20% of men's races. Wow. So, part of that is there haven't been races in the East, but most of that is Mikaela Shiffrin.
Yeah.
She gets credit for that.
Yeah. All right. Shifting gears here a little bit. I've worked with you many times while at Universal Sports / NBC Sports / Olympic Channel in the dead of night, sometimes 1 a.m., 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m. How did you get into broadcasting, and how have you been able to at least help transform Alpine coverage for United States viewers?
I was getting way too much sleep, and I said, I'm going to need a job where I don't ever sleep again. And it was perfect. I haven't slept in 20 years. I think as a racer, you know so much more about the nuances of everything that's going on in your sport. And, part of that is sort of an ignorance and an arrogance kind of mixed together because you don't realize how hard it is to broadcast until you try doing it yourself. Uh-huh. But in my time, also, there was very little coverage of alpine skiing. There might be 8 races a year. And so why I thought, and I kind of backed into broadcasting, to be honest with you, part of me thought I could do this, and I've got so much to say because it's so much, I just had so much to say because I was in it. That was my thing.
Sure.
So I wanted to impart that which I did not think was being imparted at the time. It's kind of really just get behind the scenes, tell the stories, try to explain why ski racing is so hard, because visually, I think to people that don't do it, it just looks like people sliding down the mountain. So there was trying to bring some respect to the athleticism of the sport. So those were the things that drove me. And basically, I'm a social cat, and I like to BS with people. I like to BS about my sport. Like, that's what I like to do, and I recognize that. And so I wanted to tell all these great, funny stories that we experienced when we were on the road. And so that's kind of the engine that drove me. But really, I had no plan on how to do that. It wasn't like so many of my colleagues that I work with now who, at a very young age, they wanted to be broadcasters. They knew it. They worked for the high school radio and did all that. I didn't do that. I didn't know that you could. I just, when I went to college, I thought I'll study journalism because I enjoy the art of storytelling and communing with people. That simple. I didn't like the idea of doing one thing, drilling down on one thing for the rest of my life, because I'd already done that. And then one of my colleagues and close friends and great mentors, Todd Brooker, who was the broadcaster, the analyst at the time for ESPN, had to open he was opening a Wendy's. And in order to open a Wendy's, you have to go to Burger College. Again, stuff I didn't know. So he couldn't broadcast for 3 months. So because Todd Brooker had to go to Burger College, they had an audition for some other people to fill in for him. They threw my name in the hat. I went and did the audition. I got the job. That's how it started back in 1997. So I owe my start to Todd Brooker's brief hiatus, and then I got to go work with him for many years. So that's how it started. And then in terms of, what I wanted to change or bring to it was back to what I said at the beginning, just really try to drill down on the nuances of the sport in a way that's understandable to everybody. So don't dumb it down. Don't just be general about your sport. Pick up these little tiny nuggets, which are so important to the sport, and then pull back and try to explain that because people aren't dumb. They just don't have the background.
Right.
So if you give it a little time, people can understand what you're saying and have something about the sport to sink their teeth into.
Well, and one of the things as a producer that I always tried to relay to my team was let's not talk above the audience, but not talk below them, because if you talk above them, people are going to get lost and they're not going to understand. And if you talk below them, the people who are more savvy at the sport are going to tune you out, because it's like you're not giving me any value. And so I think that's what you do really well is you're able to explain something in such a brief amount of time, especially when they're coming down the hill, to identify maybe not necessarily on the skier that you're seeing, but for the next skier or the next time they come out. So how have you learned how to do that as you've progressed in your career?
Yeah, I mean, because I started out as a reporter, and I think the real challenge as an athlete going into the sport is that there is such a correct way to explain something, and in your mind, and I think this is common among athletes, you're so afraid of being wrong or underselling something that you over-explain it. You know, like it's like this, but it's not like that. And it's like this, but it's not like that. And so you don't trust yourself to distill it down to one point, because if you make one point, and in television, you don't get 5 minutes to explain something like a coach might do when they're trying to explain the nuance of a turn or what someone should do. You don't have that time. So you can't go down that rabbit hole of trying to unexplain, don't think I mean this, but do think I mean this. And I know, in 5 cases out of 7, this is right, but the other 2 cases are that, you don't have that time.
Sure.
And so that's what took me a long time to get out of that mentality of, I was afraid that, the 10 people, that were my teammates that knew this concept would say, yeah, dude, you kind of butchered that. You can't worry about those people.
Yeah.
You're trying to explain it in a manner that provides some illumination for the people. And so it took me many, many years to unclutter my thoughts and just distill it down to, and be okay with being mostly right. And I don't mean to say like inaccurate telling lies. I just mean just not to defend yourself on television like you've been put up on the stand. And that's, I spent 5 years doing that. And when I was a reporter, I would do stand-ups, and I would do it. Like, it took me 10 takes to do anything, because I had to say it exactly how I wanted to say it, so as not to be wrong. This fear of being wrong really tangles you up. And now, Don, I don't give a shit if I'm right.
Well, but
I've been liberated. No,
but you're honest. I mean, if you're honest and true, you don't have anything to worry about, as they say. So, and that's what I kind of liked. Now, with Olympics, you still act in the reporter role, and at least from Pyeongchang is where I remember seeing some of your reports, and I don't remember the specifics, but I do remember they were very creative on how you approached what you were doing. What do you think about when you're covering the Olympics versus just a World Cup?
I try not to. I'm a little tone deaf with the audience, because back to what I was saying before, I want to take something, I don't mean to say complex, but that's really important to the sport, and then just pull back enough so that most people can understand what I'm saying. So I've given them a nugget that can, move them forward with their understanding of the sport, but I haven't just said some platitude to fill time. And so in some ways, I play all the roles, and I do play-by-play, and I do analyst, and then reporter as well. And I do like being able to shift around. And when I'm the reporter, particularly at the Olympics, you have more resources to do things. And every day I would get to sort of impart this little nugget, and one, for example, in speed skiing, the coaches, as you know, will climb trees, because when someone's going 90 miles an hour and you're down in a hollow, you only get to see them for 0.2 of a second, right? And the coach is trying to absorb this, so they'll climb 30, 40, 50, 80 feet up into a tree to give themselves a view, right? And just that right there, just doing it without saying anything. This guy's up in the tree because otherwise he's only going to see his athlete for 2 seconds. Like, oh, Yeah, that makes sense. They're going that fast. Oh, right. How do you coach this thing? So the coach needs to be a tree climber. Just that. I haven't said anything. I've just gone there. And so that's what I did in Sochi is I climbed a tree and I interviewed the coach who was 80 feet up in the tree for 30 seconds. What are you doing up here? And you just happened to be in the one turn where, Bode kept boning it. Like he was killing everyone in training. And then this one turn, and we were just right above it. And so you have now told a story about ski racing and what is required of the sport and the coaches. And then you've narrowed it down to this turn here is the difference between Bode Miller getting that gold medal in 2014 when people think he's past his prime and not. And so you've made it relevant to the race, and yet you've told a bigger story. And 30 seconds have expired, and we're done. Even if it took me half an hour to get up that goddamn tree.
And that's great stuff. I mean, and just having gotten to know you, you are a creative person. You have a great sense of humor. And so when you can package all that up into a tree report, it makes the viewing experience more enjoyable.
Yeah, and it's more fun to do the job, right? I mean, if that's the thing, is if the job becomes boring, you become boring, and right, there's that knock-on effect.
Yeah.
It's the old Confucius saying, if you love your job, you'll never work another day in your life.
That's true. That's true. All right. So for cycling fans out there, they may recognize you as the guy on the moto following the peloton during the Tour de France. If they watch the Tour of California as well, I'm sure they see you there in that capacity as well. So how did you get into that, and what does that job entail?
That was an interesting one, is that, at the point in my career pre-cycling, I was really just doing winter work. I had younger kids. It didn't work to be working year round. So I'd never pursued anything in the summer. And there was part of my personal evolution where I really was uncomfortable doing television in an arena that I wasn't an expert in. I'd already been doing television for 10 years. And I still didn't think of myself as a television person. And so it was very hard for me to think about taking on a sport that I wasn't an expert in and then being a guy on television that had to talk about it. So I was at that point in my career where I thought, all right, I can take on something else, because I didn't grow up a cyclist, and I watched it. I was certainly not an avid bike racing fan at that time. I just knew that now was my time. I was working for David Michaels, who was our boss for many years at Universal Sports, which became the Olympic Channel, which is now part of NBC. And he was the producer of the Tour de France. And I knew there was a job opening, and I made an appeal to him. I said, I don't know cycling inside and out, but I am an outdoor cat. Like, that's where I don't love the studio. I like being outdoors and mixing it up with people. And there was a familiarity with alpine skiing and cycling were similar. And they were, similar reporters. I knew where to go to get the information that I needed to be conversant in cycling. And so I made the appeal. He made me send him. I had to write a little essay for him why I could do this job. And so he gave me a shot. And that was in 2011 for 2012. And boy, steep learning curve, and so nuanced. And I think like all sports, right? If they don't appeal to you at first, and you kind of look at them, you're like, kind of boring. I don't really see the appeal to this. I can't appreciate the skills required. Why would a guy want to bike that long for that far? Seems boring.
Sure.
And that guy must be boring because he's super repetitive. And then I got out there, some of these mountain passes, and I thought, as a downhiller, I thought me and cyclists lived on opposite ends of the gym, right? They liked repetition and endurance and killing themselves. I like to take a chairlift to eliminate the endurance work
for 2 minutes
and go as fast as I could. Yeah. And then when I watch these guys on descents, it's just it's insanity. So I have a whole new respect for them. But yeah, it was so after my first year at the Tour, which by the way was my first bike race. So
wow,
talk about going right, into the fire. And it was really hard. I didn't understand the language. I could ask questions, people would answer, and I would be like, I have no idea what you said. I have no way to follow that because I don't even understand your answer. So that was unnerving, as much studying as I did. But you have to go through that.
Sure.
Right? You have to go through that. And the tour is a great way to do it because you do it for 21 days straight. And so over time, I started to understand it. And then Sam Flood, who's the president of NBC Sports, came along, and he always comes to the last couple of days of the tour. And he said, I got an idea. How about we stick you on the back of a motorcycle to report from inside the race? And that's just, you're talking to the guy that likes to climb the tree. I was like, put me on. Oh,
perfect.
Yeah, every day of the week. That is so me. And so he asked, I said yes before he finished his question. And that's how that whole thing started. It is a long, long, long 3 weeks. But as work goes, it's awesome.
Well, and you mentioned how you got into this without having the experience. And I think, having been in a position where I've been able to hire talent, I don't think maybe viewers understand. Sometimes it's about the ability to get the job done and not necessarily the expertise that you have. Now, if there's not any progress in the subsequent years following, then of course there needs to be an adjustment made. But if you have the ability to get the right answers and ask the right questions and perform the job, that is something you can grow into. And it's sometimes doesn't always seem fair, but it makes sense from a content delivery perspective. And so when I hear you say that it was a steep learning curve, you were able to do it, and you've been doing it for how long has it been now? 5-6 years?
Well, 2012 is my first one. And given that this one does happen, that will be my losing track. It's 8 or 9.
Eight,
yeah. 8 or 9. No one asked me to do math.
Yeah. So almost 10 years. So now when you're in this role on the moto, what does your day look like, starting from the meetings that you have each day to the start of the race, during the race, and then after the race?
It's kind of like this dead sprint every day. The job is it's 80% logistics, 20% work, but it's a little different in the opening stages because we've actually been in the same hotel for 3 or 4 nights as we prep and do interviews with various teams and just go out to the different press conferences and try and just load up your satchel of information that you hopefully just spread out over the course of the broadcast, which is 21 days. But on a daily basis, once we get going, it's, we've driven, I'm on the start line team. The guys, for those who follow cycling and know, the name Phil Liggett, Paul Sherwin, Chris Froome, Vandervelde, Paul Burmeister, that are in the studio, they're all at the finish line. That's where most people are. Once the race gets going, because at the beginning we are all as a team, and that's been in the past 70 people, right, that NBC brings to France. We're off getting information. We're basically, it starts this year in Nice. We'll have been in Nice 5 days before the tour kicks off. Then when it kicks off, you've got the start line team, which are all the faces that people have known forever in cycling: Phil Liggett, Bob Roll, Christian Vandervelde, Paul Burmeister, now Chris Horner. That's our finish line team. I'm on the start line team. So when they're done every day and they do their wrap ups and they do the post game or whatever, as soon as they're done, they drive all the way to the next finish line. So the end of their day is long and it sucks. Their mornings are more leisurely. We wrap up the stage before, and we go to the proximity of the next start line, which is obviously tends to be closer to the previous finish line. And so the producer then of the show and our start line producer, they connoiter at night. And then in the next morning, we get, a lot of stuff is done by email because everyone's running and gunning. And then we will go to the start line and we meet in the village. And the village is this very festive place where they have all the food from the region and all the little clowns and this whole theater that goes on there for the public. And we meet there and we go over our plan and we talk about the different people we're going to interview. Steve Schlanger is the interview master. So he runs around at 200 miles an hour and interviews everybody. And because my role is on the motorcycle, I'm out more shopping for stories and conversations. So I will do 1 or 2 interviews that are at known times. And the rest of the time, I'm literally running back and forth, just trying to find directors or someone else I know that's got some information that I need for that day. And everyone is engaged in conversation. So I'm just pinging back and forth, trying to find someone who's not engaged in conversation and then just suck all the information out of them relevant to that day. And I've got my little notebook and I'm writing it all down. So I'm trying to get as much info that might be related to what a team did yesterday, how it might play into today. And I'm trying to hit as many teams as I can that are relevant, that I think are relevant for that day's stage. And so when I get on the motorcycle, I'm loaded up with a few stories to tell. And then the race takes on a life of its own. And my job is to add to the conversation that's going on. So I don't come in out of the blue and say, I know you guys are talking about this, but I want to tell you about this. I'm always listening to when they stumble upon something that I know more about.
Yeah.
And I say into my mic, to my producer, I can add. Either they get me in or they don't. And then when they start asking, and then as the race starts to progress, and usually the front end of the race, not always that interesting, and then it gets more interesting as the stage moves on. I'm listening to them, and they will bring up a question. And then I try to go to that team car to get to the answer to that question. Not that they haven't asked me to go do it. I just know that they don't have the complete story, and I'm trying to finish it off. So that's how I use my motorcycle, and that's my role, apart from just to observe what's happening. And there's a crash every 10 seconds, so there's plenty to see. And then at the end of the day, race to the finish line, and sometimes I'll do some finish line interviews and whatnot, still in my moto outfit. It's 100 degrees out, I'm dying, I haven't eaten all day. And then we're wrapped up typically around 6. That's when I have lunch. And then, as you know, Steve Schlanger, world's most impatient person, all he can think about is logistics and how we're getting to the next hotel. So that job is done for me. I just get into the car with Schlanger. I prefer to drive and have him navigate. But sometimes he'll just be there with the engine revved. Car's already moving. I jump in and we go for that hotel, and try to get to the hotel before dinner shuts down. Take a shower and go to sleep. So that's every day. Maybe I've driven as much as an hour to get to the start line. Then I've spent 6 hours on the back of the motorcycle, and then an hour or maybe 2 to get to the next hotel when the day's done. So it's mostly logistics, right. And you're trying to do things as efficiently. And we do not mind the speed limit very well, because you're just trying to get any semblance of downtime that you can to just rest your thoughts, right. And be human. It's a long, long 3 weeks.
How would you describe what it's like being in a peloton from your perspective? Obviously you can't be in the middle of it, but there are times, like you said, when there's crashes where you have no choice but to go through that. So how would you describe for our listeners what it's like being behind one of the most prestigious races, if not the most prestigious cycling race in history?
Yeah. I mean, no question, it's the most prestigious cycling race. And I guess there's for people that don't follow cycling, the peloton is the main group of riders. Obviously, they don't all stay together from beginning to end. It starts to break up. But the way the race is arranged is that main group of riders behind it. There are 22 teams in the race, which means there are 22 team cars. And they're all lined up, and they're supposed to maintain the order of the existing general classification results from the previous day. So whoever's leading the race, their team car won on down. but there's two sets of cars. And so the second set, once the race breaks up, that first set of cars goes ahead and the second set of cars stays behind. There are some, put it this way, I want to say the number is 24,000 police on motorcycles, cars, etc., throughout the Tour de France. Not all at once, but
Sure.
hired by the different prefectures throughout the country. And so inside the peloton, it's this living organism of gendarme, of special forces, of medical cars, medical motorcycles. There are communication motorcycles, and then there are a handful of people that do what I do. I want to say it's about 5. So there are a lot of vehicles in the race. And then there's the camera bikes. The only people that are in with the riders are the camera bikes. And occasionally the still photographers who pass through like little bees. Yeah. Then they shoot forward and then they take pictures. So where I live is behind the race. And that's where the cameras are not. And what happens there is utter chaos at times. Sometimes you could fall asleep, nothing's happening. But when the race, for example, slows down and the riders come back to talk to the director, to get more food, to get more drink, or they've all stopped on the side of the road to take a pee, a natural as they call it, then everyone cycles back through this peloton. And these are narrow roads in Europe, and it is utter chaos. Once you put a little downward slope and people are going 35 to 65 miles an hour, then it gets gnarly. And so we are all packed over on the left side of the road. Team cars are packed on the right side of the road. And the service lane is the left side of the road, meaning any car or team car that needs to go back into the peloton to service their guys, or they got a flat, or they're needed, they call for permission and they come ripping up the middle fast as they can go. So that space in there is not only confined, it's congested with people going different speeds and riders weaving in and out, riding on bumpers. The fact that there's not more carnage in that space is beyond comprehension. And it speaks to the level of professionalism and attention that's being paid by all those pros in there. That's my motopilot. That's the drivers of those team cars, which is the other directors, and the athletes themselves, their ability to just weave through all manner of chaos on those bikes with that, tire that's got a 1 centimeter contact patch is stunning. So we think of it as the endurance athletes, but that's an extreme sport. What's happening in that beehive is an extreme sport.
Yeah. Well, and the caravan that follows, it's almost, to me, at least the way you've described it, is it's almost like a competition within the competition.
Oh, totally. Right. People have different ways of, there's a real advantage to when the race is on, where the road gets narrow. You want to be a car up front, because if your rider has mechanical, or you want to be right there. You don't need car number 22 because they're really back. On a congested mountain road where everything's moving slowly, they're 5 minutes back. I don't know if that's exactly right, but they're minutes back. And you can imagine if you can't help your rider for 5 minutes, the disadvantage there is. And so, they're always trying to, like, the car number 22 is always trying to think of a reason they need to be at the front of the group, right at the base of the climb. And everyone else on the road knows the game, right? So they're like, get back, like, that's not your spot, that's my spot. And so the cars are constantly shuffling, trying to be respectful for real need versus trying to work the system. Sure. And they're always doing that. When
you are following and there's a crash, do you have to change to be that reporter? In other words, so there's a crash and there's a lot of, yard sale type items on the road and stuff. And if someone gets hurt, medical staff are already there. But do you change into that reporter that needs to find out the status of them, or is that left to someone else?
No, that is me. And so anytime there's an incident, any incident, it's my reaction. You can do triage in a sense, like something more important is happening up the road. And so we're going to take a cursory look at this, explain it, and move on. But in most cases, it's you pull over if you can. If you are creating a hazard, there's the gendarme. They're going to wave you through, and there's no negotiating that, right? That it gets awfully serious when if people start blocking the road. But I'm usually trying to get as much information on crashes as I can as quickly as possible. So apart from, I might jump off the bike, run over there, see what's going on, but then I'm off communication, right? I can only do that for so long because they'll say, "Where the hell are you?" And then come back to the motorcycle, report on that. But of course, I'm just like, I don't know what's wrong with anyone. I can just kind of give us a visual recount of what has happened. And then over time, I will go to the team car or even to the medical car and ask them for whatever information they will give me. And sports.
Sure.
Doctors in particular are very reluctant to pass along anything that might seem like speculation.
Right.
So, but there is, I have a relationship with the medical directors at this point, and so I will ask them, and they will say, "This is what I can tell you," and that's it.
Yeah.
But I am absolutely the follow-up guy because I'm the only one out there that can know, apart from the team tweets it out.
Yeah, no, that's great information. And for me, at least, whenever I get a chance to watch, I always, those are the questions that I always think of. How did he get that report, or where did he get that information from when he still has to continue following the peloton? So that's good information. Okay, so you mentioned a couple of the people that are on the broadcast. A lot of people know who Phil Liggett is, who's been covering cycling for decades throughout the world.
Since the invention of the wheel.
So what can you tell our listeners what it's like working with him, being a historical figure in the sport?
Yeah, let me put it simply. If my wife could remarry, it would be Phil Liggett. And I've told her she can't remarry. I don't know if she believes me or not. Phil Liggett, what I love about Phil Liggett, and I think it's a great lesson for all broadcasters, is that he is on the air exactly who he is off the air. He is the most charming and charismatic guy that that I've known. I mean, he is. I could just listen to him for hours, and as a matter of fact, I do.
Yeah.
And it's a tremendous comfort for me as a reporter, because when he reaches out to me and says, "Hey, Steve, what have you got for us today?" I feel like I'm, telling a story to I don't want to say my grandfather, because we're not that far apart in age, but there's something sort of avuncular about the way he speaks. Yeah. And I feel like I'm sharing a story with, everything's going to be okay because we're just sharing stories here. If I blow it, he covers it. Or if I swallow a bug, which I have done on the air and choked, there's something, he is incredibly charming. He is just a born storyteller. The cadence to his voice, there's a musicality to it. That's what I've listened to for 6 hours a day. Yeah. And so he is just the greatest guy, and everybody knows him. Right. And he's got time for everybody. And I'll watch him talk to someone, and I'll be asking myself, I wonder, these people must have grown. He must have grown up with these people.
Yeah.
And I've come to find that he just met him in that moment that I walked past. And so that's kind of how he makes everyone feel, like you've been friends forever. So I think the world of Phil Liggett.
Well, and I never had the opportunity to work with him, but definitely listen to him. I did, however, have the opportunity to produce cycling with Paul Sherwin before he passed away in 2018. And he was so funny. In pre-production, he would tell some really corny but
Oh,
funny jokes. And he just treated you like you were somebody that he would devote his time to you, regardless of who you were as well. So how would you describe the chemistry between him and Phil when they were on the air?
losing Paul Sherwin, uh, it's that's like losing an arm. He was, as much as Phil is the grandfather of our sport. Paul was he was the motivator. He was the one that kept the team together. He kept the team laughing. Um, and he couldn't go 5 seconds without telling a joke.
Yeah, it was
And
so much
and as
fun.
I was telling you, like Phil on the air and off the air, they're the same people. Paul Sherwin was the biggest smartass on planet Earth. Funny, and he had a one-liner for everything,
Yep.
and so he actually reined in that guy. He almost played a bit of a straight guy to Phil on the air, which is not who he is.
Yeah.
Like he had, he had, he was like a comic with ADD. It was hard to hold his attention for more than about 20 seconds. He'd turn around, he'd engage someone else, and he'd launch a joke, turn around, and then just constantly going. And at the same time, absolutely engaging.
Yeah.
And there was a few times where Paul, pulled me aside. He said, "You know what? I can't believe you've only been covering cycling for so long, because you did, you when you reported that," he's like, that's inside information. Like, that's fantastic. And that just meant so
Yeah.
much to me. And so he did that with people, and he pulled them aside, and he was very genuine in lifting everybody up. But he could definitely cut you down too. He's pretty quick with that. He was pretty quick witted, so you had to be on your feet.
Yeah.
But that's who he was. And you put Phil and Paul together, and I one of the great, and even before I got involved in cycling, I recognized those two guys as one of the best teams in sports broadcasting ever
Yeah.
together.
Yeah, it was definitely one of the special moments to have, worked alongside him when he came to Denver when we were covering cycling. So, it just, and, just learning so much about the sport that I really never traditionally covered. I was always a stick and ball type person. And, having done Olympic sports and these, endurance type sports, it gives me a different perspective on truly how big of characters, and I mean that in a positive way, that they are throughout the world.
Throughout the world, right?
Yeah.
Because cycling, they were for the longest time the broadcasters for all the English speaking countries in the world.
Yeah.
So unlike, I can't think of American broadcasters that are really known out, off our shores.
Yeah.
They are. Like when Paul Sherwin died, there was an international mourning.
Right.
It was unbelievable. And I think another thing I didn't mention that is maybe something to aspire to is when you talk about great broadcast teams, Phil and Paul, they were inseparable. They, that rapport they had on the air was who they were.
Yeah.
They drove together. Paul, and they always had their British car that they drove down from the UK, so the steering wheel on the wrong side. Paul was therefore always on the wrong side, so Paul always drove. Phil was the passenger. They, in the days where they didn't have their own rooms, they shared rooms. I mean, they did. They have breakfast together. They have lunch together. They have dinner together. Everything together. Everything together. Those guys were closer than brothers.
Now, the broadcast team currently includes you, Phil, Bob Roll, Jens Voigt, Mr. Schlanger, who you mentioned earlier, Steve Schlanger.
Mm-hmm.
Joel Felicio is your producer, and David Michaels, I believe still directs or oversees, coordinating producer. So you've got a collection of people who have experienced cycling their entire career. What makes NBC's coverage special for the Tour de France?
It's interesting because, you've got whatever. I mean, it's 100 years of experience there. It's 100 years of experience. Like, I am so the rookie on that team. Schlangers. So I've been there 1 year longer than Schlanger, but he's covered more cycling than me.
Yeah.
And so there's a passion there. And, it starts with David, whose first Tour de France was like the Le Mans days on the back of the motorcycle with the pilot that I have always had on the Tour de France. I think he was in 86. And then Joel Felicio, who looks like he's 10 years old, but he's been covering the Tour for 20 years, whose sole existence is to absorb information about cycling. I mean, it is his passion.
Yeah.
And so you've got a lot of knowledge about the sport and constantly pushing, what can we do better? What can we do more? What haven't we done? And I talked to Joel today. And so he's always trying to, pushing people months out, a year out. He's watched the Tour from last year. I don't know how many times since, what we can do better. So you've got guys at the top that are pushing the people with the real knowledge, Jens Voigt, Van de Velde, Horner, Roll, pushing those guys to dig a little bit deeper. Because, that is also one of the things I've noticed working with, analysts that are previously athletes, is that you think you don't have to do any more research. You already know everything.
Yeah.
And the really good ones are the ones that are trying to find out the stuff they don't know, or utilizing all of their contacts to find out what's going on right now, as opposed to interpret it through your lens of history and experience, right. Which is only half right. So the guys at the top push the guys with the knowledge to get more knowledge and be, continually better. I think, going down the line, I thought Bob Roll, he had to take on the impossible, right? He took on Paul Sherwin's role. And, apart from how that would be interpreted, you've got the two guys with the British accents, and that's all that charm that goes along with it. There's just sort of an audio expectation of what the broadcast is going to sound like, and Bob's never going to sound like that. And yet, I think Bob, to his credit, Bob is always Bob. Bob will always be Bob. I mean, he's super smart. Obviously, he knows cycling inside and out. And I thought he was better as, the analyst, even than he was as, super entertaining, wacky guy in the studio. Mm-hmm. He really, really stepped up. And I think he was roundly applauded for his work at the Tour. So for Bob, doing the impossible, I was super impressed, really impressed by him. Horner, the new guy on the team, as a rider, just loved chatting. So you knew he had something to say. You just didn't know if putting the cameras on him was going to make him kind of stultified, and he was not. He was Mr. Say anything, and then you've got Christian on the other side, who is, everyone loves Christian, and Christian doesn't have like sharp edges like Horner does. So they created such a great back and forth. I love it because he drew Christian out a little bit, and Christian was very quick to kind of tell Horner, well, yeah, that may be your opinion, and clip his wings a little bit. So I loved watching those two guys together, and because I think Christian was better than ever with Horner in there ruffling feathers.
Yeah.
And then Paul Burmeister playing traffic cop. And then, Jens is out there in the tent alone, and just, he can't open his mouth without making me laugh. And everyone knows Jens, right? Everybody knows Jens. So people are constantly like talking to him because he's not in the studio. He's outside, and he's trying to do two things at once. And very often, like, he has the ability to call up a director at any point in the race and get the information. So I maybe like spending 15 minutes on a mountain descent trying to get forward to the director that we very badly need this information from. And then with my mic sticking out the window, at 60 miles an hour to try and get the answer, like, oh, Jens got that. He just called 5 minutes ago.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's how that goes.
All right.
And then Schlanger, of course, Schlanger
Yeah.
is, he and I have been working together forever, but there is no one that can do more interviews in less time and clearly thought out interviews than Schlanger, who is a complete menace to cycling when he's in the finish line doing interviews.
Yeah.
It's awesome to watch.
And I've enjoyed working with you and Schlanger, because you're the two that I worked with the most. So I kind of understand a little bit about both of you. So
we're opposites.
You are opposites, but you guys, work well together and complement each other very nicely. So, okay, a couple more questions and then I'll let you go. What's been some of the most memorable moments that you've had while covering cycling?
Oh man. I've been part of these, what are now they like these epic moments. I think of crashes. I think maybe the one that's most internationally known, and I was right there in the middle of it, reacting like everyone else in the world, not like the reporter, like, what am I looking at? Was Mont Ventoux when Chris Froome was leading the tour, and Ventoux is a very exposed, apart from being a legendary climb in the tour, it's a very exposed mountain. There's maybe a third of it's above timberline, and so it gets wind buffeted. And it was so bad that they had to lower the they had to lower the finish line, and they had to do it the day before. And all the finishes, they have the metal guardrail that flanks the road, usually a few K out from the finish line, particularly in the mountains, just to keep the road open for the riders, because we've all seen how it compresses on the riders and can become dangerous for the riders and certainly impact the race. Well, they didn't have time to move all those barriers down the mountain. So only one side of the road was protected, and then the other side of the road was protected, like it was a barrier for the last 800 meters, right? So everyone's closing in on the race. You've got Chris Froome, Richie Porte, and I think Bauke Mollema out in the lead. And Froome is being challenged. All of a sudden, the road gets so compressed, the motorcycle has to stop. The three of them collide into the motorcycle. They all go down. Froome goes down, and the motorcycle behind him runs over his bike. So now his bike is destroyed, can't ride it. And because this particular stage was so compressed, I couldn't be on the moto. So I was actually riding and reporting from a team car. So I could see on the video as this was going down. And then that's when Froome starts running up the mountain, just to make some progress. And the team car, as I alluded to before, team car position is so important. But even though the team car was in the lead, they couldn't get through the people. And Froome wasn't about to wait because the competition was going away. But there was also ahead of the team car neutral support, which carries a bunch of bicycles with them. Well, it so happens, so they pull a bike off. Well, the bike doesn't even come close to fitting Froome, and the pedals are not compatible with the cleats on his shoes. So he's like, he's got these old-fashioned toe clip strap down pedals on a bike that it looks like a BMX bike. It's just tiny, and it's like a gong show. You're like, I cannot believe this is like an international competition, and Froome's on this circus bike. And then eventually the car gets up to him. He dumps the bike, and then he gets on and then goes on and loses a whole lot of time. Ultimately, they neutralized the times in the race at the time of the incident. Well, this was, I was in the middle of it, watching it all go down. I know all the motorcycle pilots very well because that's my posse, and got the inside story because they were being maligned for interfering with the race. And what had happened was that a spectator jumped in front of them. They had to hammer the brakes. The riders, and they had nowhere to go. The riders, there was no room on the road to get around a motorcycle. That's how congested the road was. And so then they created the problem. And of course, you have to go a certain amount of speed on a motorcycle to keep it from tipping over.
Right.
And so the bike that was behind Chris Froome has a camera pilot on it. Now, you can't just stop in the middle of this crowd because you're going to dump the bike. And so they ran over his bike. And so, it's like, holy smokes, is this really a race? Anyway, that to me was one of the great moments in sports, and it created a knock-on effect to where, nowadays when the bikes on the roof, they all have all the right pedals for all the right riders, because these bikes don't get used very much for obvious reasons. And they have seat posts which can be adjustable on the fly for the riders. So like everything was modified as a result of that moment. But he went on to win the Tour, but maybe the only person in Tour de France history to run towards the finish line as part of his way around France.
Yeah. All right. The final question I have for you, I hope, is what's been some of the best advice that you've ever been given as a broadcaster?
Be yourself. Don't try to be someone else. Be yourself. And that's one that sounds so simple, but it has taken me so long to feel like I can just be myself, and it uncomplicates everything so you can focus on the content. Because I think when you start out, it's hard to picture yourself on television, and therefore you just, wittingly or not, start speaking like someone on TV. And I don't know about you, but I hear that, when I listen to certain, local news broadcasts, or, even listening to NPR, right? There's a voice of NPR. That's not a normal speaking voice.
Right.
And interestingly enough, and I'm looking at his poster right now, a guy that has, I think, embodied that more than any other broadcaster is Ira Glass, who is the host of This American Life. And he is obviously not a sportscaster. He's anything but. He's a storyteller. And he did this interview with Terry Gross, and they talked about what they thought was important to the whole storytelling process. And he noticed when he watched the news that when you listen to the news, you tend to drown out the lead, someone leading into a quote. And then what captures your attention is the person speaking, because they're speaking in a normal voice, that they're answering a question, they're trying to get their point across, and there's a certain intonation that goes with that makes it easier to understand. You're just more in tune with that person than the person doing the lead and the tag. And if you ever listen to This American Life and you listen to Ira Glass, whenever he leads in and out of things, it sounds like he's making it up. He's stuttering. He sounds like Jimmy Stewart, right? There's nothing clean about the way he speaks. And it's so much easier to listen to. And that's my mantra. Be yourself and speak in a voice that's human and not made for TV.
I think you just gave me a little bit of advice for my podcast because I don't get my questions out all perfect 100% of the time. So that's a good piece of advice.
Find that liberating. I hope, yeah, and I do. When I'm reporting on the back of the motorcycle, it was a real problem when I started. I had to say exactly these things, and occasionally there's things that need to come out exactly right. When it comes to, hard news, right? You don't want to screw up someone's injury. You don't want to screw up someone's words. You don't want to misquote. But otherwise, just get it out like you would in normal conversation, and not. And I started my career in media as a writer, and I was constantly trying to speak like I wrote, and that was highly problematic.
It sounds almost robotic at that point.
It does, and it's very difficult. I mean, over time you can learn how to write how you speak, but when you need to report and be quick, you can't write exactly what you're going to say down.
Right.
You can't. People think like, "Do you have a teleprompter?" I'm like, "Does it look like I have a teleprompter on the back of the motorcycle? Are you kidding me, man?"
All right, Steve. Well, thank you so much for spending the time with me and discovering what you do, not only with Alpine but with cycling. And just your perspective on the industry. It's great talking with you again. I wish, I hope that somehow, somewhere in the future, we can connect again and work together, because I always had so much fun working with you.
I had fun catching up again, Don. This is, I'm honored. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. So where are we going to see you next?
The Tour de France. Like all things in this era, that's not a certainty. But right now, the Tour de France is still scheduled for its latest back in June. Or no, it's longer ago than that. They said we're moving the tour from its normal start date, which is the end of June, to the third week of July. That's typically its range. Mm-hmm. August 29th to September 20th are the dates. And, we keep hearing this and that from the ASO, which is the organizing committee of the Tour de France. They have to obviously defer to what the French government will allow. And I know that of late, there's a couple of newly emerged red zones of COVID that are part of the route. And so it makes it hard for them to say this is exactly how it's going to happen as of the date of when we're talking, which is, mid-June. So for right now, I am banking on employment, literally banking on employment, Don, for August 29th to September 20th. Where that route takes us, I couldn't tell you.
Yeah.
But I am positive. I have a positive vibe about this thing happening.
Yeah, well, good. Well, whatever it is, I wish you best of luck. Stay safe on the moto if you're on the moto again, and we will be watching you on TV.
Awesome, Don.
All right, thanks again, Steve.
Including me.
Yeah,
you got it.
Appreciate it. All right, that was Steve Porino, Alpine Ski announcer and cycling reporter for NBC Sports. I am really fortunate to have worked with Steve in my time at NBC Sports. He's a really fun and funny guy and has an incredible knack for finding stories to help viewers get to know not only more about the sport, but the intricacies of what goes into the sport, the athletes, the stories, the mechanics. You get the idea. If you want to know more about Steve, give him a follow at Steve Porino on Twitter, and look up Steve Porino in a Tree on YouTube for some of the creativity he brings to his reporting. And finally, look for Steve and his fellow announcer Steve Schlanger on The D Route, a YouTube series which chronicles the amusing life on the road between those two during the Tour de France. And if you don't have a pen to write all that down, visit the Sports in the Making Facebook and Twitter pages or sportsinthemaking.com. Now be sure to subscribe to this podcast so you catch both previous and upcoming episodes where I talk with people in the sports and sports broadcasting industry who have made an impact on how sports are viewed throughout the world. Episodes are released every other Thursday through the summer. If you have any suggestions on what you'd like to know more about in sports, drop me a line at sportsinthemaking.com or contact me on Facebook, Twitter, or LinkedIn. And if you have any questions for me or my guests, I'd love to share them on a show. Wherever you listen to this podcast, I'd appreciate it if you like it, share it, and leave positive reviews on your social media channels. Also, be sure to subscribe to Sports in the Making so you don't miss out on more episodes, and you can catch up on the previous episodes there as well. I'm your host, Don Cardona. Thank you for listening to Sports in the Making.